Does working longer hours lead to greater productivity, or does it harm employees and organizations? The debate is highly polarizing. Supporters contend that long hours are essential for success. Critics at the same time argue that excessive work hours leads to burnout, mental health challenges, and decreased productivity. Research from Stanford University shows that productivity declines sharply after 50 hours of work per week, with employees working 70 hours or more producing little or no additional output. This raises an important question. Is the 90-hour work week outdated, or does it verge on illegality? The concept of 90-hour work week has ignited significant debate, especially following the remarks by influential business leaders who advocated for such demanding schedules. They argue that extended hours are crucial for boosting productivity, stimulating economic growth, and maintaining global competitiveness. However, this view faces very strong opposition from labor rights advocates, health experts, and employees who see these demands as exploitative and harmful to well-being. The debate is highly polarizing. Supporters contend that long hours are essential for success, pointing to historical examples of rapid economic growth achieved through hard work. Critics at the same time argue that excessive work hours leads to burnout, mental health challenges, and decreased productivity, ultimately harming individuals and organizations. This raises an important question. Is the 90-hour work week outdated, or does it verge on illegality? To address this, we need to examine the issue from the perspective of labor laws, of health implications, and of global trends. By exploring these facets, we can determine whether a 90-hour work week is a viable strategy or is it a relic of the past. The idea of working excessively long hours is not new. During the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries, workers, including children, often labored for 12 to 16 hours a day in factories under very harsh conditions. This era prioritized productivity over worker well-being, leading to widespread protests and the rise of labor movements advocating for better conditions. One significant milestone was the establishment of an 8-hour workday, popularized by the slogan 8 hours of labor, 8 hours of recreation, and 8 hours of rest. This movement gained momentum in the late 19th and the early 20th centuries, culminating in labor laws such as the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 in the United States of America, which established the 40-hour work week and mandated overtime pay. Similar reforms were also implemented globally, with the International Labour Organization setting international standards. Despite these advancements, the cultural perception of long work hours persists in some societies. In countries like Japan and South Korea, overwork has historically been seen as a sign of dedication. This norm has led to phenomena like the karoshi in Japan, where employees have died due to stress-induced illnesses. Such cases highlights the dangers of normalizing excessively long work hours. The 90-hour work week debate hinges on a fundamental question. Does working longer hours lead to greater productivity, or does it harm employees and organizations? Proponents argue that extended schedules are necessary to achieve ambitious goals, especially in competitive industries such as technology and startups. They often cite examples from countries like Japan and South Korea, where long work hours have historically been associated with quick economic growth. Critics, however, counter that such schedules are unsustainable and counterproductive, leading to burnout and reduced efficiency. Advocates emphasize the importance of hard work and discipline, arguing that young professionals should be willing to put in extra hours early in their career to build skills and contribute to organizational growth. They also point to historical examples such as Japan's post-World War II economic boom, where long work hours were seen as a driving force behind rapid industrialization. However, this perspective overlooks the diminishing returns of productivity. Research from Stanford University shows that productivity declines sharply after 50 hours of work per week, with employees working 70 hours or more, producing little or no additional output. This suggests that longer hours often results in inefficiency and errors. Furthermore, it is only people who are deployed in senior positions with better remunerations that can truly sustain a long work week, as our system and institutions are built to sustain them, often supported by assistants, secretaries, and a million unseen extra hands. The legality of a 90-hour work week also depends on labor laws of individual countries. While some nations have strict regulations, others offer more flexibility, often leaving workers vulnerable to exploitation. In India, work hours are primarily regulated by the Factories Act, the Shops and Commercial Establishments Act, and related legislations. Under the Factories Act, Section 54 provides that daily hours cannot exceed 9 hours in any day. Every worker is entitled to an interval break of at least half an hour, and not more than 5 hours of work should pass before such interval. No worker under the Act shall be required to work for more than 48 hours in a week, and Section 59 provides for overtime compensation in case any worker exceeds the weekly or daily limit of work specified in the Act. Under the Minimum Wages Act, the law provides that when the minimum wages for an employee are fixed for a particular period of time and the employee works beyond that period, then the employee has to be paid overtime wages for that extra time. The rules made therein about working hours point out that the number of work hours in a day should not exceed 9 for an adult. Now, under the Shops and Commercial Establishment Act, the law lays down overtime rules and procedures for workmen employed in different institutions. Each state in India has its own version of this law, which means specific provisions may vary a little here and there. However, the general framework remains similar across most states. Typically, the maximum working hours for employees are set at 9 hours a day and 48 hours a week. Employees who work beyond that stipulated daily or weekly hours are entitled to overtime pay, generally at double their regular wage. Employees are entitled to a weekly rest day, usually on Sunday, though other days can be designated as rest day depending upon the state and depending upon the nature of the avocation. A minimum of 30 minutes of break must be given after 5 hours of work, although specifics can vary from state to state. The total time that an employee spends at work, including rest intervals, should not exceed an average of 10 to 12 hours depending upon a state. However, these laws often exclude sectors such as information technology and other startup industries, leading to a culture of long work hours in industries such as IT. Globally, the ILO's convention in 1919 established the principle of an 8-hour workday and a 48-hour work week, serving as a benchmark for national labor laws. In the European Union, the Working Time Directive limits work hours to 48 hours a week, including overtime. Similarly, the US Fair Labor Standards Act mandates overtime pay for hours worked beyond 40 hours per week. Employers who violate the work hour regulations can face penalties, including fines and strict legal action. For example, Japan has introduced stricter regulations and penalizes companies that fail to comply with the work hour limit. In India, employees who breach the mandates of the Factories Act can be fined or even imprisoned, although such cases are not very effectively prosecuted. Now, the health risks of working 90 hours a week are well documented, affecting both physical and mental well-being. Prolonged work hours are linked to cardiovascular diseases, chronic fatigue, and weakened immune functions. A joint study conducted by the World Health Organization and the International Labour Organization found that working 55 or more hours per week increased the risk of stroke by 35% and the risk of heart disease by 17%. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, reports that long work hours can result in stress, fatigue, and poor health behaviors. Mental health risks are equally concerning. Prolonged work hours are strongly associated with burnout, anxiety, and depression. A study by the Harvard Business Review found that employees working for more than 50 hours per week are significantly more likely to experience mental health issues. The phenomena of karoshi in Japan underscores the dangers of overwork. In 2020, the Japanese government reported over 2,000 cases of employees dying from stress-induced illnesses or the 90-hour work week also leaves little time for personal life, leading to strained relationships and social isolation. Research shows that employees who lack a work-life balance are more likely to experience marital dissatisfaction and parental stress. The economic cost of overwork is also significant. Employers face increased costs due to absenteeism, turnover, and healthcare expenses. A report by the American Psychological Association estimated that workplace stress costs US employers over $500 billion annually. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated the adoption of remote working and flexible schedules. A report by ILO found that 70% of the employees prefer hybrid work mode, combining remote and in-office work. Companies illustratively like Google and Salesforce have embraced these models, allowing employees to choose where and when they will work. The 90-hour work week debate raises critical questions about productivity, legality, and worker well-being. While proponents may argue that long work hours are necessary for economic growth, the evidence suggests that such schedules are unsustainable and harmful. Research depicts that productivity declines sharply after 50 hours of work per week, and excessive work hours are linked to severe physical and mental health risks. From a legal perspective, a 90-hour work week violates labor laws in many countries, including India, where the Factories Act or the Shops and Commercial Establishment Act limit work hours between 48 to 60 hours at any event. However, weak enforcement and cultural norms often permeate and allow such harsh practices to persist. The 90-hour work week is not only an outdated concept but also a potentially illegal and harmful practice. As the future of work evolves, prioritizing efficiency, innovation, and employee well-being will be the key to building sustainable and productive workplaces. The question is no longer whether we can work longer hours, but whether we should.